In 1996, 28-year-old Paul Templar was spending the year leading tours in Zimbabwe. He was born in the country when it was referred to as Rhodesia, and always had a fascination with wildlife and safaris. Before returning to Zimbabwe, he had recently spent a few years in the British Army. Paul passed a difficult guide certification and would show tourists a vast array of animals, with some of these including hippos. On Saturday, March 9, 1996, Paul was asked to fill in as a guide for a canoe tour down the Zambezi River. His friend was sick with malaria, so he was happy to help out and replace him. Paul also loved this specific portion of the river and knew it very well. There were 6 clients on the tour. 4 of them were airline employees and the other 2 were a couple from Germany. Paul was also assisted by 3 apprentice guides, with the whole group using a total of 3 canoes. They set off down the river and recall a fairly normal and relaxing start. The scenes were spectacular and people were having a good time. A little while into the trip, they came across a pod of around 12 hippos. These creatures are a common sight on the Zambezi River, so the tour group was not alarmed. Paul led the excursion in his canoe, with the other 2 traveling behind. While navigating around the pod of hippos, one of the canoes behind him got off course. As he turned around, Paul saw one of the canoes get launched upwards. It almost acted like a catapult, with the guide assistant in the back getting flown through the air. The assistant, who went by Evans, landed in the water and immediately started getting pulled by the river's current. While the other clients were able to scramble back into the canoe, Evans was floating straight toward a mother hippo and her calf, which were about 500 feet away. Paul took action and directed his canoe towards Evans. Meanwhile, one of the other assistant guides helped the clients move to a safer place on the river. As Paul paddled closer to Evans, he noticed a bow wave coming straight at him. These are typically made when a hippo or large crocodile swims quickly through the water. Paul instinctively slapped his paddle on the water, which creates a loud percussion sound underwater that can deter these animals. It worked, and the bow wave was no longer coming towards him. Paul continued paddling his canoe towards Evans and eventually reached him. They both extended their arms, and moments before their hands could touch, a rush of water exploded from below the surface. A hippo had just come between them and stopped the rescue. The unwelcoming surprise would turn their ordeal from bad to treacherous. Paul wasn't exactly sure what happened that moment, but remembers not knowing where he initially was. His legs felt the river's rushing water, but the upper half of his body was in a different place. Paul then realized his whole upper body was lodged in a hippo's throat. For whatever reason, the creature decided to spit him out a few moments later. Paul reached the surface of the river and gasped for fresh air. He then saw Evans not too far away from him and started swimming in that direction. Out of nowhere, Paul was struck by a hippo again, but this time his legs became trapped in its mouth. The creature began wildly thrashing the tour guide around, eventually spitting him out again. Paul then resurfaced once again and tried swimming for safety. In one of the worst strokes of luck, he turns to his side and sees another hippo charging towards him with its mouth open. The creature locks onto Paul, this time grabbing a hold of the side of his body. The aggressive hippo then started alternating between shaking Paul on the surface to submerging him underwater. This is a tactic meant to drown and tear the other's body apart. Paul was able to hold his breath at the correct times and maintain a strong enough grip to avoid getting torn apart on the surface. One of the clients who witnessed the attack would later compare it to a vicious dog trying to tear apart a rag doll. After approximately 3 minutes, the hippo spit Paul out into the river. Another assistant guide, Mac, brought his canoe right up beside Paul. Mac reached out with his paddle, which he used to guide the injured man to a safe nearby rock. Once on his feet, Paul asked the assistant guide where Evans was. The response he got was simply, "He's gone." Paul took a moment to calm down and take stock of what they had. His gun, radio, and first aid kit were all lost in the water. 1 paddle, 2 canoes, and 6 clients remained. Paul was also in extremely rough physical condition following the multiple hippo attacks. His left foot looked like it had been beaten with a hammer and one of his arms was almost completely crushed. Blood was also seeping from his mouth, which pointed to signs of a punctured lung. Mac was able to put some spare saran wrap around Paul's injuries. Knowing it was crucial to get off the rock and escape the river, the 2 men got back into Mac's canoe. They paddled towards shore, all while a hippo bumped into the watercraft continuously. Miraculously, they made it to the river's shore without being knocked over into the water. A Zimbabwe rescue team caught wind of the situation and were able to safely secure the remaining members of the tour group. Evans was discovered deceased 3 days later, with his death being attributed to drowning. The group then faced an 8-hour car ride to the nearest hospital. In the following months, Paul went through several major surgeries to address his injuries. The operating doctor was skeptical about saving both of Paul's arms and one of his legs. Ultimately, surgery was successful for his leg, but the doctors could only save one of his arms. Paul distinctly remembers waking up at one point and having no feeling in his left arm. The sensation was surreal for someone as active as himself. His despair was quickly turned around by the relief he had for his remaining healthy limbs. After a period of physical therapy in Zimbabwe, Paul moved to the UK where he received a prosthetic limb. His experience led others to reflect on how to safely maneuver through a hippo's habitat. It's important to maintain a large gap of distance, because although these creatures don't see humans as prey, they can be extremely territorial. If their space is encroached upon to a certain point, they'll aggressively defend it. Hippos also tend to roam around looking for food in the late afternoon, so it's best to avoid their habitat during these times. Hippos are a physical force, with males weighing between 4,000 and 9,000 pounds and females weigh around 3,000 pounds. They average about 10 to 16 feet when full grown and grow about 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Hippos also have a shocking bite force of around 2,000 pounds per square inch, which is one of the strongest on Earth. Their teeth are also unique, with their canines reaching up to 1.6 feet long and their incisors reaching up to 1.3 feet long. When in a fight or attacking a human, they will perform what some call the hole puncher. This is when the hippo continuously bites down in quick succession, creating various holes in their victim's body. Their territorial nature coupled with astounding physical traits makes them a real potential threat in the wild. They cause an estimated 500 deaths worldwide per year, along with many people suffering injuries. Although this story happened in 1996, there's a recent one from June of 2024 that I'll share as well. In Kruger National Park, which is located in South Africa, 3 men were spending the day clearing invasive plants. They were sent by the Biodiversity Social Project and were focused on the banks of the Sabi River. At some point, the men were working in thick vegetation when they were charged at by a hippo. Fortunately, the group were accompanied by 2 armed guards, who fired at the creature shortly after the attack began. As a result, the hippo quickly ran away and leaped back into the water. All 3 researchers were brought to a nearby doctor, who treated them until they could go to a larger hospital. Their injuries were described as serious, but not life-threatening. Kruger National Park saw another hippo attack almost exactly a year prior, in August of 2023. A man named Cobus de Wet worked for the ECI, based out of South Africa, which stands for Environmental Crime Investigations. He was camping in a certain area of Kruger National Park when he was attacked and killed by a hippo. Experts weren't able to gather a whole lot of evidence on the incident, but assumed it was spurred on by the creature's territorial and aggressive nature. This was a major hit to the environmental community, as Cobus was on the front lines when catching poachers in that specific area. To put it into perspective, hippos commonly share their water environments with all sorts of creatures, including crocodiles. It takes a special sort of animal to make even the largest crocodiles move out of the way when they see a hippo coming. However, a hippo can be vulnerable to predators when they are small and not fully developed. A part of the reason for their aggressive nature is to protect their offspring from creatures like lions, hyenas, and crocodiles. Africa is already a country that boasts an extreme variety of dangerous creatures, and hippos are definitely near the top of that list. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more animal attack videos. Have a great day.